here to talk to you about That Was Easy, Why Simple Matters. Just to give you a little bit of background, I'm a professor here at the Kennedy School, finishing up my 8th year here. I got my PhD in economics from MIT, and between MIT and coming here to the Kennedy School, I spent 2 years on the faculty in the Department of Economics here at Harvard, 8 years on the faculty at the University of Chicago, what was then the Graduate School of Business, now is the Booth School of Business, and I spent 3 years at the Wharton School and then came to the Kennedy School in 2006. And here at the Kennedy School, one of the classes I teach is a class on behavioral economics and public policy. So this is a class that tries to get the students to think about the science of behavior change. And a lot of the public policy issues that we deal with in society are really issues around behavior change. They're around trying to get individuals to either do more of activities that we think would be socially beneficial or less of activities that we think are not socially good. So we want people to get more education and pollute the environment less. And these are fundamentally questions about behavior change. So the broad question in this course I teach is, how do we get people to change their behavior? When I frame these issues to my students, I try to frame them in the following way. The first question to ask is, do people or organizations want to change their behavior? And there are a remarkable number of things out there that people have lots of good intentions and they just fail to follow through. So do people want to change their behavior? And if the answer is yes, then the question is, well, if they want to do it and they're not, why aren't they? What are the barriers to behavior change, and how can we help individuals overcome them? The next question is, if people don't want to change their behavior, then how can we change what people want? How can we change the incentives? Can we give individuals better information? Things like that. I'm going to focus today on the first category. If yes, why don't they? And in particular, I'm going to focus on one particular barrier to behavior change, and that's the complexity associated with many of the activities in daily life in which we would like individuals to engage. So complexity can be a major barrier, and we're going to talk about some of the evidence on how complexity deters taking action, and some of the ways that you can think about eliminating that barrier or mitigating the complexity of some of the choices and actions that individuals are asked to take in society. So just to kind of frame this broadly, here is a slide. I will go through it with you. That is part of an important research paper published about 20 years ago now that highlights the basic issue that when choices become more complicated, the complexity itself can change the way people make decisions. So here's a very simple decision. You're a doctor in a hospital. You have 2 patients who are critically ill and need to have surgery. There's only one operating room available, and it's likely that the patient you don't operate on first is not going to survive to be operated on next. So you've got to decide. You've got 2 patients here. Patient A is 52 years old. Patient B is 72. Who do you decide to take into the operating first, and why? So does anyone want to tell me how you think about this question? Yes. Can you speak loud, because they are trying to record this?
I would expect that the default would be that the younger person would have potentially more value lifetime.
You would pick the younger person because that individual has a longer life expectancy. Presuming conditions are equal. So you kind of get more bang for your buck out of operating on the younger person first, because they will survive to live a longer period of time. So most people think exactly the way you do. So the fraction of individuals, when faced with this scenario, who choose to operate on the 72-year-old first is 38%. So that's well less than half. So you're in good company relative to the rest of the population. So now let's make this decision slightly more complicated. I'm going to make it more complicated by just adding a third patient who's waiting in the waiting room. So we've got the same two patients we had before, and now we have a third patient, patient C, who's age 53. Okay, so now you have to decide, who am I going to take from the operating first? Patient A, who's 52, patient B, who's 72, or patient C, who's 53. Does this make the decision more complicated? little more deliberations? The important point I want you to take away from this slide is it changes the answer. Because now when you give people this scenario, the fraction of people who choose patient 72 goes up to 58%. So you might have thought that if I add patient C here, the fraction of people who choose patient B would go down, because patient C is going to siphon off some of the people who picked patient A before, some of the people who would have picked patient B before. So the people who picked patient B is going to go down. That's not what happens. The number of people who pick patient B goes up. And the rationale is that patient A and patient C look very similar. It's very hard for individuals to say, well, let me pick A over C. A is 1 year younger. That's not a strong rationale. They have a hard time wrestling with that choice, and they end up picking patient C instead. So we made a choice a little more complicated and got a very, very different outcome. Okay, here's another motivating example from a laboratory study. Students were brought into a lab. This study was done at Columbia, and they were asked to choose a gamble. So the first set of subjects were given a choice between these three gambles up here. So what should you notice about these gambles? So this is just you're going to win a certain amount of money depending on the coin toss, whether it comes up heads or tails, and you have to pick which of these three payoffs you want. So the first one is low risk. You get $5 no matter how the coin comes up. If it comes up heads, you get $5. If it comes up tails, you get $5. The second choice is you get $3.50 if it comes up heads, $8.75 if it comes up tails. And the third choice is 0 heads, $13.50 if it comes up tails. So as you go down the list, the choices are becoming more risky. So the top choice, no risk, $5 either way. The bottom choice is all or nothing. You get 0 or $13.50. And then the other thing to notice is that as you go down the list, the expected payoff is highest for the bottom gamble. The payoff goes up as the gamble becomes more risky. So the expected payoff of the top gamble is $5, and the expected payoff of the bottom gamble is $6.75. Okay, so if you're willing to take a little bit of risk, you're going to get a higher payoff. So this is kind of asking people, how much risk do you want to take? Okay, so individuals are asked to choose one of these gambles. Some individuals. Second set of individuals are given the choice of these gambles right here. Okay, so same setup, heads versus tails. The top gamble up here is exactly the same. The top one on the right is the same as the top one on the left. No risk, $5 either way. The one on the bottom is exactly the same. Okay, 0 versus $13.50, all or nothing. The one in the middle over here is I think the fourth one down up here. Okay, but the only difference here is we've kind of fleshed out the riskless gamble versus the very risky gamble with more options in the middle. As you go down, they're becoming more risky. The expected value is also going up. Okay, but the same choices you had over here are also available over here. Okay. How does moving from the choice set on the left to the choice set on the right change the decisions that people make? So if you look at the small choice sets, what you find is that 16% of individuals choose the $5, the gamble that has no risk. So basically what this is telling you is if you give people a coin toss, they're willing to take a little bit of risk. Okay, the amount of money at stake is small relative to the amount of wealth most individuals have. They're willing to take a little bit of risk. Only 16% of them choose the least risky, the simplest option in the choice set, $5, $5 either way. If you give them the large choice set that has 11 options, so by the same logic that I gave you with the which patient do you operate on first, if only 16% of people are choosing the $5, $5, now I add more options to the choice set, you would expect the fraction of people choosing $5, $5 to go down, because now there are some other options and maybe some of them would be more attractive. And in fact, what you find is the fraction of people who choose $5, $5 goes up to 63%. Okay? And the story is that when you've got 11 options to choose from, it's really complicated. Nobody wants to sort through which one of these ones makes the most sense. They look at it and they say, $5, $5, that's better than nothing. That's more money than I had when I walked into the room. I would rather just choose that than have to figure out which of these many other options is going to make me happiest. Okay, now one of the features of this study is that the simple option, $5, $5, also is the easiest option, or also is the lowest risk option. So it's hard to disentangle, is this a preference for simplicity or is this a preference for not taking risk? The authors replicated this type of a choice environment with a different set of gambles where the simplest option was in fact the most risky option, and they get similar results. If you have a small choice set, even when the simplest option is most risky, very few people choose it. When you have a large choice set, individuals overwhelmingly choose the simplest option, even if now the simplest option is the most risky option rather than the least risky option. Okay, so the point I want you to take away from these two studies is that the complexity of a choice, making a choice more complicated, can actually change the outcome in ways that are somewhat counterintuitive. And what I'm going to do for the rest of the talk is now go through 5 policy areas, 5 relevant policy areas, and give you some examples of how complexity changes outcomes, either for the better or for the worse, in these important policy domains. And if you have questions along the way, I am happy to entertain questions along the way, or we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. But don't be shy about interrupting if something burning occurs to you as we go along. So the first case study I'm going to talk about is savings. So this happens to be the primary area in which I've been doing research for the last 15 years. So this is a topic I feel like I know well. So the point I'm going to argue is that for most individuals, savings is a pretty complicated decision. So the first issue is that there are lots of different ways to save. So how should you save? Here's the signpost on the right of the screen. Some of you may remember the story of Alice in Wonderland, and Alice comes across the signpost and all the signs are pointing different directions and she has no idea what to do. And so there are lots of different ways you could save, and for many individuals, this is overwhelming. If you don't have an MBA or a degree in economics or a lot of experience, a lot of people don't know what to do. Okay, then once you've decided how you're going to save, then the next question is, how much are you going to save? Are you going to save 5% of your pay? Are you going to save 20% of your pay? Well, that's another layer of complexity. Then you, once you've decided how much to save, have to decide what kind of investment allocation are you going to have if that's a relevant option for the savings vehicle you've chosen. And there are lots of different ways you could answer that particular question. And if you take individuals, once again, who have limited financial expertise, this decision quickly becomes overwhelming. So what's some of the evidence on this? So this chart right here gives you data on the savings plan participation rates of employees in 3 large companies. These are just 3 illustrative companies. The findings I will show you have been replicated for hundreds of other companies. 3 large companies that all offer a match on savings contributions of their employees to a retirement savings plan. The match is typically something like 50 cents on the dollar up to 6% of pay. That's a pretty generous financial incentive to save. That's a much better rate of return than you're going to get on almost any other investment you could make. because it's a risk-free rate of return. And the savings plan participation for newly hired employees at these three companies ranges between 38% and 50%. And like I said, these are pretty typical numbers. For many, many years, employers looked at these numbers like this and said, well, it looks like the newly hired employees at our companies aren't that interested in saving. So that's a good reason for not forcing them to save, because a lot of them aren't really interested in doing it. Only less than half of them are signing up for the savings plan. So we have this plan, it's available. If people want to use it, they will. But based on this evidence, looks like a lot of employees aren't that interested in saving. Okay, but about 20 years ago, some employers started experimenting with automatic enrollment, which is companies put you into the savings plan automatically, and if you don't want to be there, then you opt out. So you can still not save if you don't want to save, but all the companies have done is change whether you're in the plan automatically, that's the default, and you have to opt out if you don't want to save, versus whether you're not in the plan, that's the default, and you have to opt in if you want to save. The participation rate under automatic enrollment for employees with similar demographics go up to between 85 and 95%. Okay? This is a dramatic increase in the fraction of individuals who are saving for retirement. So the question then is, why do you get such a dramatic difference? Why is automatic enrollment so successful in changing the fraction of individuals who are saving for retirement? And I'm going to posit two things, both of which are important. So the first is that most people, in fact, want to save. So remember what I opened with, that if you want to understand, if you want to change behavior, the first question is, do people want to do this or not? And I'm going to argue that with savings, most people want to be saving. I'm going to give you a tiny bit of evidence about this in just a minute. Why do they want to save? Well, first of all, there's a big need to save for retirement. If you're retiring at age 65 and life expectancy is age 85, the average person will have 20 years of life to sustain off of their savings and whatever Social Security, other social welfare benefits are available. So there's a need to save, and people understand that. And then in these savings plans I just talked about, there's a financial reward through the employer match that makes it attractive to save. Nonetheless, if you don't automatically enroll people, not very many of them, or at least not very many of the younger employees, are saving. So that's the first reason. People want to save. This is a question for which people want to do more of something, and they're just not getting around to it. And the second reason is that automatic enrollment simplifies doing what people already want to do. So it takes this complicated decision, should I be saving in this savings plan? How much should I be saving? What asset allocation do I have to choose? And it boils it down to a binary decision. The employer is automatically enrolling me in this savings plan at 6% of pay invested in a target retirement date fund. Is that better or worse than not being in the savings plan? So it's just a simple yes or no decision. Is this better than not doing anything or not? And that these two things coupled, the fact that it's something individuals want to do, and now the choice has been boiled down to something easy that I can wrap my head around. These are the things that lead to the tremendous success of automatic enrollment and increasing savings plan participation. Now, some people looked at these early results when the research was first coming out about 15 years ago, looked at these results and said, oh, well, this is companies being paternalistic. The true preferences are the blue bars. Employees are really not that interested in saving, and companies are coming in and compelling people who don't want to save to be in the savings plan. This is paternalistic. This is bad. We don't think companies should be doing this. We don't think governments should be encouraging companies to do this. After 15 years of research, I can tell you that I do not believe that is true. And I could marshal lots of evidence to tell you that, in fact, I think most people do want to save, but I'll just give you one piece of evidence. And this comes from the study of a company that required individuals to make an active choice about whether or not they wanted to be in the savings plan. So this is a mechanism that tries to get at a common problem that happens when decisions are complicated, and that is when choices are complicated, people procrastinate. If the choice is hard and there's no reason to do it today, then you want to put it off as long as possible. And in the case of savings, there's rarely a deadline, which means that you can put it off for a very, very long time. This is in contrast to something like doing your taxes, which is also very complicated, right? No one is signing up to do their taxes early. The vast majority of taxpayers, even those who are getting a tax refund in the US, file their taxes the week before taxes are due. The reason they can't procrastinate ad infinitum is because there is a deadline. The government has set a deadline, and that's what's forestalling the procrastination. So this is a company that set a deadline with respect to deciding whether or not you wanted to be in the savings plan. You can't procrastinate. So they had a deadline, and then they got rid of it. So we can look and see what happens when they have the deadline, what happens when they don't have the deadline. So when they don't have the deadline, this chart right here shows you the fraction of employees who are in the savings plan at different levels of tenure. So you can see for the newly hired employees, it's 41%. This is right in line with the slide I showed you earlier. And then participation goes up a little bit as employees gain some tenure at the plan. When employees are forced to make an active choice within the first 30 days when they're eligible for the savings plan, look in particular at the 3-month bar, the savings plan participation rate goes up to 69%. So that's, that's a almost 30 percentage point increase in savings plan participation when you don't allow employees to procrastinate. So this is the evidence, this is in my mind one of the compelling pieces of evidence that individuals really do want to save. And one of the factors that's generating these low participation rates is the complexity of the decision that results in procrastination. That the low participation rates are not reflective of preferences, they're reflective of this is a really hard choice and I don't know what to do with it. So automatic enrollment works because it simplifies the decision. But if complexity is a big deterrent, that suggests that you could take other approaches to simplify the decision, and they might also be successful as well. Yes? Can you speak loud?
Of course, I'm Ed Mayo, and I hope I articulate this correctly, sorry, as a question, because the opt-out has become such a poster child for behavioural economics, so one's heard it so many times. But surely the true control test of this is not you proving that most people want to save, but actually what the effects are in a company where there's auto-enrollment, and you know that most people don't want to save.
Yes. So I have a great example of that. I actually had a slide in here, and I was looking through it last night, and I thought, oh, it's too long. I'm going to take it out. Yeah, yes. It's actually a company in the UK. Sounds like you're from the UK. And they used automatic enrollment, and they were automatically enrolling employees at a very high savings rate of 12%. And it turns out, so 12% is more than many individuals feel like they can save. And at this particular company, there was a wrinkle that made 12% actually the worst place to be. And the wrinkle was, at this particular company, they matched contributions, but in contrast to companies in the US, and I don't know whether this is just typical, this is just indicative of this company in the UK or many companies in the UK. You can answer this for me, perhaps. For the first 12%, you didn't get a match from the company. Only for contributions above 12% would you get a match. So the reason that this makes 12% a bad place to be is that if you're at 12%, you're saving a lot and you're never getting a match. If you wanted to save 12%, you would be better off cycling back and forth between a low contribution rate and a high contribution rate so that half the time you're actually getting the match. So this is an interesting company because the employees are being automatically enrolled at this bad default. And what we find is that 75% of employees opt out within the first 3 or 4 months. If you look at the 25% who don't opt out, they're very interesting because they're sticking at this bad default. They are the lowest paid employees at the company. And our interpretation of that finding is that pay is highly correlated with financial literacy. And they're the lowest paid employees, but they're also the least educated employees. and they don't understand that this is not a good place for them to be. So I hope that answers your question. And that's why the first point I made, that individuals want to save, is important to why automatic enrollment works. Because if you automatically enroll them in a bad outcome, they will in fact move away. Because it's not hard to move away. The decision's easy. Let me give you two other pieces of evidence on this, on why I think complexity impacts savings outcomes from two other studies. So this is a study that looks at the correlation between the size of the investment menu that employees are given and the fraction of employees that are participating in the savings plan. And these are all companies that don't have automatic enrollment. So these are companies where employees have to actively sign up for the savings plan if they want to participate. So remember I argued earlier that one of the things that makes an optimal savings decision complicated is all of the different investment options that are out there, okay? So on the x-axis here, and I realize these numbers are probably too small for you to see, on the x-axis is the number of funds in the investment menu employees have to choose from, and it goes from a low of 2 to up here on the right-hand side, this is about 60. Okay? Most of the data is over here. So most companies have 10 to 20 funds in their investment menus. Once you get above 20, 25, you don't have a lot of companies over here. So the black line shows you the estimated relationship between the number of funds that are in the investment menu and the fraction of employees that are in the savings plan. And the dotted lines around it are giving you the 95% confidence intervals. So those are fanning out on the right-hand side because there's not a lot of data. But what this pattern suggests, first of all, you can see it's pretty much downward sloping, but if you kind of linearize it, that each additional 10 funds in the investment menu is associated with about a 2 percentage point decline in savings plan participation. So if you went from an investment menu that had 0 funds to 100 funds, your participation rate would fall by 10 percentage points. So it was research like this that motivated a big plan change that Harvard made a couple of years ago. So Harvard, in its employee savings plan, has 3 different companies, 3 different investment providers you can use. And across those 3 companies, there used to be more than 300 investment options. And a couple of years ago, Harvard dramatically winnowed things down so that now there are about 24 investment options to choose from. And research like this was influential in that decision. This slide right here is data from Sweden. So Sweden, in 2000, changed its social security system to add a private account piece. So they have a piece of social security, which is more traditional social security. And then they added onto it this little piece where 2% of your pay gets put into an account that has your name on it. And you get to manage the investment portfolio for your money in this account. So when Sweden unrolled the system, there were 465 funds to choose from. Now, they couldn't guarantee that everyone was going to choose an investment allocation, so they set up a default fund. It was actually a default investment portfolio. It was managed by a pension board that picked what kind of investments were in there. And when this system was rolled out, the Swedish government initially in 2000, so over here, there's a massive nationwide publicity campaign to get people to actively choose the investments they wanted in that plan. Billboards, radio, TV, everything to get people to make an active choice because this was a new system. So what this chart shows is over time, on the x-axis, what are the fraction of new participants in the Social Security system that are making an active choice about their investment allocation. So the inverse of this would be the fraction of new participants that are sticking with the default. So in the first year, 68% are making an active choice, even though there are 465 funds to choose from, but there was this massive publicity campaign. Now, interestingly, 2000, for those of you who can hearken back to what the economy was like, this was the peak of the tech bubble. Amazon, Microsoft, Intel, all those stores that you don't remember anymore because they don't exist, e-toys, things like that, because they went out of business. This is the peak of the tech bubble. And the most common investments chosen among those 465 were technology mutual funds. And then it crashed a year later. Okay, so the first year is different from all the other years. So focus on what's happening after 2000. So you get to 2001. Now the publicity campaign goes away. You can't sustain this publicity campaign forever. The publicity campaign goes away. And now we're just looking at new entrants to the system. So these tend to be new workers entering the labor market, getting their first job, or maybe some individuals who had taken time off, like stay-at-home moms who are jumping back in. And over time, the number of funds in the system keeps on going up. Today, there are almost 1,000 funds in the system. And what you see as the number of funds go up is the fraction of people making an active choice for their investment allocation just steadily marches downward. So by 2006, and that's the last year I've got data for in this slide, it's down to 8%. And that's half what it was in 2001. So this is another piece of evidence consistent with the idea that as the choice becomes more complicated, individuals are doing things differently. In this case, they're ignoring the choice altogether, and they're just going with the default fund. If you don't make a choice, the money will be taken out of your paycheck and put into the default fund. So all of this suggests that maybe there are other approaches to simplifying the savings decision that might also change outcomes. So a number of companies in the US have started using simplified enrollment processes, either instead of automatic enrollment or sometimes in conjunction with automatic enrollment. So here would be an example of a simplified enrollment form. To enroll in the Helpful Corporation Savings Plan, check below and return this form. So if you check the box, you will be enrolled in the savings plan at a pre-specified contribution rate, 5% on this slide, and a pre-specified investment option. So this is kind of taking an automatic enrollment style default, but instead of having it happen automatically, you can check a box to opt into that. And a number of companies have used and are using this approach. So, and I've studied some of them. The first company we looked at was a company that had an extremely low participation rate for newly hired employees. Newly hired employees, 9% of them were signing up for the savings plan. When they adopted this quick enrollment approach, it went up to 34%. Now, 34% is still a low number, but it is almost 4 times greater than 9%. So you're getting, a 3 to 4 times increase in your savings plan participation rate from a simplified form that costs you almost nothing extra. 1-page sheet of paper costs you almost nothing, and you get a pretty dramatic effect. Second company we looked at went from 6% to 16%. The first company that I showed you, if you looked at what happened to their overall savings plan participation rate, in the 4 months that they rolled out these forms, it went from 55% to about 67%. It was a 10 to 12 percentage point increase in a 3 to 4 month time span. The second company, they kept on using these forms over and over and over. If you looked at a benchmark set of employees before they started doing this who weren't participating, so they start out at 0 definitionally, how many of them over time will sign up for the savings plan? After 3 years, it was about 22%. The company started sending out simple enrollment forms once a year. Every time they sent them out, they get a bump up. You can see the bumps up. And after 3 years, they've doubled the fraction of employees who are the recalcitrant non-participants who've now signed up for the savings plan. Extremely simple, extremely cost-effective intervention, dramatic results. Okay, so now let's look at a couple of other policy domains. So the second case study is college financial aid. So in the US, there are hardly any truly free universities. A college education is expensive, and many students don't have their own or family financial resources to completely pay for their education, or for some of them to pay for any of their education. And so they need to apply for financial aid. And the gateway for financial aid in the US is to fill out this form. It's called the FAFSA. It's a Federal Government Department of Education form. And several years ago, if you'd looked at this form, it was 8 pages long. It had more than 100 questions on it. It was 4 times longer than the simple tax forms, so individuals who don't have a complicated tax situation would fill out. And it was estimated that about 850,000 eligible students weren't even applying for financial aid. 850,000 is a huge number if you think that the typical birth cohort in the US is about 4 million individuals, about half of whom are going to college. So if we had 4 million times 4 years, 16 million people, kids, college-age kids, half are going to college, 8 million, 850,000 are eligible and not applying. So, and not all of those 8 million are even eligible. So, a lot of people not applying. And there were a number of things that made this decision complicated. One is, if you were going to if you were a college student, you're applying for college to start in the fall of 2014, say, you can't even apply for financial aid until January of that year, and you won't know how much financial aid you're eligible for until after you've already applied to college. So it's not really helping your college application decision process. So a few years ago, H&R Block, which is the biggest private tax preparer in the US, partnered with some researchers to examine what would happen if you made the process of filing for financial aid easier. So this is not something H&R Block typically does. They fill out tax forms, but most of the information on the financial aid form actually comes from your tax form. So it wasn't crazy for them to do this. So they took their clients who had college-aged children, and they broke them into different groups. So one group was the control group, and they were just given information, your kid's college age, they could apply for financial aid. The second group was not only given this information, they were actually given a financial aid form that had been pre-filled out with all of the information from their tax form, and all they had to do was sign it and turn it in. So they'd taken this complicated form. They didn't make the form easier, but they made the process easier by doing it for you. So if you looked at the control group, 40% of families in the control group applied for financial aid. And if you look at the treatment group that got the help, that number was 55%. So a 15 percentage point increase in the fraction of families with college-age kids who are applying for financial aid as a result of this simplified process for applying for financial aid. So that's a big effect. That's interesting. The more interesting effect is looking at what happens to the fraction of kids who are actually going to college. So it's great if we can get kids who are already going to college financial aid if they're eligible, but if you could actually increase the number of kids who are going to college, that would be an even more dramatic effect. So what they find is that in the control group, 27% of the high school seniors went on to college the next year in the control group, and if you look in the treatment group, 34% went on to college. So you're getting, once again, a sizable increase in the fraction of students who are going on to college. And if you were to rank the investments you can make in terms of the investment return you're going to get, a college education is one of the best investments out there. So another example, complexity is a deterrent to action for one of the most important decisions individuals are going to make. And if we can simplify the process, we can change outcomes. So this study actually motivated the Department of Education to try and simplify the financial aid form. So in 2009, 2010, this is the schematic of all the forms that were associated with applying for financial aid. And then you can see on the right their attempt to simplify it. It's still a lot of forms, but it's a lot less than it used to be. Yes?
This been extended at all to poverty programs? I read at one point there's something like 165 programs for poverty, but presumably they require the same information about most of the forms?
So that is an excellent question, and I think in a limited extent it's been applied, but people are certainly thinking about these things. The interesting thing in thinking about the poverty programs is that for a long time, the thinking with the poverty programs was, the concern was not that people who were eligible wouldn't apply, but that people who were not eligible would feign eligibility and apply, and that this was a rationale for making the process very complicated. Because if you made it complicated, the people who weren't eligible would decide it's not really worth the bother. And it's this research that has changed the way people are thinking about those issues to, well, gee, maybe the problem is not that people who are not eligible are being deterred by the complexity as much as it is people who are eligible and who we would like to help are being deterred by the complexity. And if we could make it easier for them, they would be more likely to claim the benefits for which they're eligible, ranging from nutritional assistance programs to housing programs to the earned income tax credit to a whole host of other things. So I think the answer is, I can't think of any dramatic studies on that front, but these issues are certainly being, love to do that if I could get great data and a good experiment to do it. Yeah. Okay. Third case study is from consumer credit. How does complexity interact with the borrowing decisions that individuals are making? So the study I'm going to talk about here is a study that was done in South Africa, and this was a South African a financial services company in South Africa that makes small consumer loans, and they were testing different ways to reach their consumer audience. So they sent out letters to thousands and thousands of consumers, and I realize the print is small, but congratulations, you're a valued client, you're eligible for this new loan product. And then there was a box in the middle of the mailing, and that's what was varied across different recipients of this message. And it gives you, this particular box gives you the terms of the loan that they're offering you. So some recipients of this letter got a box that had one loan product. Okay, so here's enjoy low monthly repayments with this offer. This loan is a 10.5% interest rate. Here's the loan amount that you're eligible for. Here's the length of the loan. These are short-term loans, 4 months, and your monthly repayment over here. Okay, so one loan product to choose from. And some recipients of the letter got a menu of loan options. So here's an example of a letter that had 4 different loan options. Actually, it had 12 different loan options here. So 4 different loan amounts, 3 different terms for the loan. So 12 different loan options. And the question is, which appeal gets a higher take-up rate? The letter that has 1 loan option or the letter that has 12 loan options? So a standard economic model would tell you that if you give people a menu of 12 options, you're going to get higher take-up because some people might not have found the 1 option attractive, but now that you're giving them 12, they're going to find one that better matches their needs. But no, this is not what the study finds. The study finds that if you get only 1 loan option, the loan applications increase by 10%. So this is consistent with the idea you give people 12 options. It's too many. It's too complicated. They don't even bother to think about it. And this effect size, a 10 percentage point increase in the number of loan applications, is equivalent to an interest rate reduction of 25%. You'd have to reduce the interest rate by 25% to get the same increase in loan applications. Okay, fourth case study comes from a program to try and get households in the UK to insulate their attics. So if you look at the types of investments individuals could make to save energy, the highest is buying a more fuel-efficient car, and the second highest is insulating your house. Yet many households don't have enough insulation in their house. So this was a study done by the Behavioral Insights team in the UK, and they were trying to figure out, well, what can we do to get people to actually insulate their attics? So they tried 3 different interventions. The first one was they offered people a discount. They lowered the price of insulating your attic. The second is they offered a block discount. So they offered a discount to you and your neighbors if you could get 3 or 4 people on your block of homes to all do the insulation at once. So they're trying to exploit some social pressure. Okay. The third one is they offered you a discount, the same discount as in the first one, but then they also offered to have a couple of big burly guys come to your house and clean out your attic, because if you are like many households and this is your uninsulated attic, the barrier to insulating your attic is not the price. The barrier to insulating your attic is before someone can go up and put the insulation in the attic, you got to take everything in the attic out of the attic so they can even get up there. So the interesting thing about this last intervention was that the help getting stuff out of your attic was not free. You had to actually pay for the guys, pay for their time to take the stuff out of the attic. And they would take the stuff out and they would sort it into your 3 piles. You know, the keep pile, that'll go back in the attic. The giveaway pile, donate to charity. And the throwaway pile, take it to the dump. But you had to pay for their time. And what they found was that this was, in fact, the most effective intervention. Okay, so this is another intervention targeted at, in this case, the complexity of taking action. The complexity of taking action, the barrier is all that junk in my attic. So if we can deal with that, we can change behavior. Okay, and then the last case study comes from healthcare. So I think healthcare is, we could have dozens of examples of how the healthcare system makes optimal decision making difficult rather than easy. I could spend half a semester on that. I'm just going to show you a couple of examples. So here's a motivating example from a study on which I am one of many co-authors. We took individuals and we asked them a question. It's basically, can you figure out how much you would have to pay for this healthcare service? So you have personally incurred $2,000 in out-of-pocket medical expenses this year. You go to an in-network hospital for 4 days. The hospital stay costs $100,000. If you had Plan X, and I'm going to show you Plan X in a minute, how much would this hospital stay cost you? Okay, so this is just a question. You go to the hospital, how much money are you going to have to pay? Now, as a consumer of healthcare, you might want to know the answer to that question, right? This is not an unreasonable thing to assume people might want to know something about. So the question is, how many people can answer this question correctly? Okay, so we had subjects to whom we gave this question, and we divided them into 2 groups. And one group was given what we call a description of a traditional health plan in the United States. Now, I realize this print is much too small for any of you to read, but that's part of the problem, right? There are so many things you need to know. We have to make the print small to fit it onto one piece of paper. And there are in-network providers over here. So these are doctors and hospitals for whom you get one set of discounts. There are out-of-network hospitals and providers over here for whom you get another set of discounts. These are all different types of healthcare services you could get in this column. And they all have different types of discounts associated with them, and different deductibles and different co-payments, and some of them are dollars and some of them are percentages. And so when we gave people this health plan T, the traditional plan, and asked them to calculate the answer to this question, 2% were able to give us a correct answer. 98% could not figure out the correct answer to this question. The second half of the sample, we gave what we call Plan S, the simplified plan. Now, Plan S still has a lot of stuff. You might look at this and say, this is not very simple. But it is simpler than Plan T. And in particular, there are no percents you have to calculate. Everything over here is in dollar terms. Okay? The amount you're going to pay to go to the doctor is in dollar terms. The amount you're going to have to pay to go to the hospital is in dollar terms. When we give people Plan S, as opposed to Plan T, 43% can calculate the correct answer. Now, 43% is still a low number, okay? But 43% is 20 times larger than 2%. So I think this illustrates one of the big challenges we have in thinking about how to contain healthcare costs, at least in the US healthcare system, which is if you want people to respond to price incentives, they have to be able to figure out what those price incentives are. And we have a system right now where it's extremely difficult for anyone to do that. And it's not surprising that if you make it hard for people to figure out what the cost is to them, they're not going to actually pay any attention to it. One of the directions that healthcare is going in the US, at least with respect to insurance, is, this example was talking about the complexity of making a choice for a given insurance product. Another nature of complexity is choosing which insurance to have in the first place. Now, for individuals who get their insurance through their employer, the employer has winnowed down the number of options significantly. So at Harvard, we have 5 or 6 choices. But many people don't get health insurance through their employer. And the US is moving in the direction of setting up healthcare exchanges. So Obamacare is basically a big healthcare exchange where if you don't have health insurance from your employer, you can go to one location, one website, and you can easily find all the options that are available to you and make a choice. Now, before Obamacare, we had other health insurance exchanges. Massachusetts set up its own exchange in the mid-2000s. The Medicare program, which is health insurance for the elderly in the US, set up a health insurance exchange in the mid-2000s for prescription drug coverage for the elderly. So we have some experience with health insurance exchanges. And once again, the motivation is to simplify the process of finding the best health plan for you. This slide is from the Massachusetts Health Connector. This was taken a couple of years ago, so this does not necessarily reflect the current website that is not working well, if you've been following the news in Massachusetts. So here's an individual who's winnowed things down to 3 different plans, and now they've got to evaluate these 3 plans. Okay, that's a lot of information to compare. So these are difficult choices. So there was a research team at Columbia that did a lab study to try and figure out how does this complexity impact whether or not individuals can make the best health insurance choice. So they brought students into a lab. These were MBA students. And they gave them some hypothetical choices. So one group was given 4 health plans to choose from. And the plans, they're given a monthly premium, they're given the cost of visiting the doctor, and then they're given a healthcare scenario. This is how much healthcare you expect to use next year. Pick the best health plan for you. And then some of them are given 8 plans to choose from. Now note that the dimensions of the health plan that they have to evaluate are very low. It's the monthly premium, it's the doctor visit copay, and it's the annual deductible. They don't have the 350 things that were on that scrolling slide that never ended I just showed you. They only had 3 things to focus on, and either 4 plans or 8 plans. And this study found that if you gave people 4 plans, about 45% of MBAs, so Columbia MBAs, these are pretty smart people. Okay, these are smarter than Joe Sixpack, average guy picked at random from the population. They've got high SAT scores, good jobs, things like that. 45% could get it right, and they were leaving about $200 on the table for those who were getting it wrong. So that was the average size of the mistake. If you compare that to the individuals who were given 8 options, when you went from 4 to 8 options, the fraction picking the lowest cost plan falls to 25%, and the size of the mistake, which is in red, being made by the people who don't pick the lowest cost plan, goes up now to about $250. And then they test a set of interventions to try and make the health plan choice easier. And the first intervention was to give people a calculator, not a literal Texas Instruments calculator with 9 buttons, but like a a little web interface that would help you evaluate the options. The second was they specified a default, the lowest cost plan. Now, you may or may not believe the default, but they did tell people what the lowest cost plan was. They didn't tell them it was the lowest cost plan. They just said, if you don't make a choice, this is the default. And then the third was they specified a default and they gave you a calculator. So you could quickly verify whether the default was in fact the lowest cost plan. And they found that when you did this, the fraction of people making a correct decision goes up to almost 90%, and the size of the mistake shrinks a lot, now more like $40 or $50. So these are approaches, interventions, that can take a complicated decision, which health plan to choose, and simplify it in a way that helps people make better decisions. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip through this last study right here and give you the main takeaways here, which are complexity impacts outcomes in a number of ways. It can lead to procrastination. We talked about that with respect to savings plans. It can lead to simplifying heuristics, and it can lead to mistakes, which is what we just talked about. And then the last point I'd like to make, which we talked about briefly in an answer to one of the questions that was asked, is that you can actually think about complexity as a policy tool, just as you can think of taxes as a policy tool. So complexity is a policy tool that's going to shape the outcome of a particular policy program. And if you want to get people to do something, you should use this policy tool to make things as easy as possible. There might actually be outcomes in society where we want to make the decision complicated, where we in fact don't want to make it too easy because we want individuals to think about things and not act impulsively and take some time. So for example, there might be reasons why you want to make it somewhat complicated to get a divorce, because you don't want people to rush into that. If you make it too easy, you get the Las Vegas weddings and you get the Las Vegas divorces. Maybe you want to have some complexity. So thinking about what's the optimal level of complexity? What are the goals for particular public policies? Do you want people to do more? Make it easy. If you want people to do less, make it hard. Okay, we're at 9:30. The next session starts at 10. We're officially supposed to be over, but I'm happy to take any questions either as a group or individually if you want. Okay. Thank you.